Welcome to another bus build video. In today's video, we prep, prime, and paint the entire interior of our bus. So let's dive right into the process. The first step in this three-stage process is the prep stage. The prep stage itself can actually be broken down into two different stages. The first stage is to fill any imperfections in the walls and ceiling. The two major imperfections that we're seeing are screw holes as well as joints and seams between panels. We are using two different methods to fill these imperfections. First, we are filling all of the screw holes with a wood filler that we can go back and sand down later. As far as the seams and joints, what we are using is a small bead of caulk along those seams that we can smooth out so that it will give us a nice finish when we go over it later. When I talk about seams and joints, I'm mainly referring to our ceiling seams and joints. You can see here I'm filling in between these ceiling panels, and why we have larger joints in these ceiling panels is, if you remember from a past video, since we had to cut our panels, we actually have an overlapping joint that we have to fill in order to get a really smooth transition. One quick tip we learned and used when using wood filler to fill our screw holes is to slightly overfill your hole due to the fact that the wood filler shrinks when it dries. If you fill the hole flush with the wall, the wood filler will shrink slightly below the wall and you'll have to go back and refill it. Now, with all of the imperfections filled, the second stage of the prep process is to sand down all of these imperfections to a nice, smooth surface. Now, sanding is one of the most critical steps to getting a good quality paint job, and if you don't know what depth to properly sand to, you might have small imperfections on your unpainted surface, and those will transition into major imperfections on a painted surface. For example, on this left-hand side, this is an area that we clearly did not sand far enough down, and we still have thin patches of wood filler that were extremely visible once we painted over them. Now on this right-hand side, we did a slightly better job because there's less wood filler visible and it's a thinner layer, but it's still going to produce an inadequate finish when painted. A visual way to know that you've sanded enough is that when the amount of wood filler you have left is just about the same size as the head of the screw that you're looking to cover up. With the prep stage complete, we are able to move on to the second stage in the process, which is the priming stage. It's really great having two people for this stage because Cam's able to cut in with a brush on all of the edges and I'm able to roll all of the larger flat surfaces. As far as what we're using for a primer, we're using a Kills 2 all-purpose interior and exterior primer. This is a multi-surface sealer and stain blocker, which is really nice because it helps cover up any of those wood grain imperfections really nice, and it also leaves a nice mildew-resistant finish. With the Kills 2 being more so for light to medium stains and us having some darker imperfections in the forms of wood knots, we decided to go with 2 coats in order to get a really consistent finish in our primer that would hopefully carry over to a really consistent finish in our final paint job. With the priming stage complete, our last step was to put on our finished coats of paint, and for our finished paint we ended up going with, I believe, a Bare Ultra and an eggshell sheen, and as you can see we went with a slightly off white. When this paint dried, it looked amazing and it just completely transformed the space that we had. That's going to wrap up the video for today. As always, thank you for watching, and if you have any questions, please ask them in the comment section below.